This edition of Tech Talk is brought to you by GlobalSpeak.com, new media consultants, corporate video and audio communications, video and audio production and distribution, live and virtual event production. Tag TV and Tag Radio is a service of GlobalSpeak.com, creatively delivering powerful marketing, video, and audio solutions. Rob, welcome to Tech Talk.
Thanks, Frank.
I think our listeners pay attention. I think we're going to be hearing something kind of unique and different. On one side, certainly the buzz that you can't pick up a newspaper or watch any kind of newscast and not hear the concern over security, cybersecurity. I think everybody's talking about it, but really, I guess it's maybe sounds silly to ask this question, Rob, but I'm going to start off with, what is the problem with cybersecurity? Why are we seeing so many breaches?
Right. Yeah, that's one of my favorite conversations or favorite topics, but also one that you can talk about forever. I think that really what it boils down to, if you look at it, there's sort of two main things from a corporate perspective that is, I guess, wrong with cybersecurity. One is that obviously the traditional approaches don't work, right? We know that just evidenced by how many breaches we see all the time. In 2016 alone, for example, just in healthcare, there was one data breach every single day, or equal to every single day, and over 27 million patient records that were stolen, which is, that's getting close to 10% of the U.S. population, right?
Well, and of course, that's what we know about.
Yeah, and that's only what we know about. That's only been what's reported, right? And so we know that the traditional prevention solutions they're not being effective. They're not working. The reason for that is that they're, by and large, all based off of rules and signatures. So they can only find and protect you against what they know about. And so the real problem is that the adversaries, the bad guys, they're just staying ahead of us, right? It's, criminals are always one step ahead sort of thing. Because we use these rules and signatures, we're not able to keep up with how quickly that they are innovating and finding faster ways around. And then the second problem is that to combat that, because the tools aren't ineffective, the way that you combat that is that you build what people call a security operations center, which is basically a whole bunch of cybersecurity analysts who go through and hunt for what they call indicators of compromise, right? So they manually search through the data to see if they can find these bad guys. But the problem with that is that, there's billions and billions of records that have to be searched through. The average enterprise gets about 10,000 security alerts a month. And it's untenable for anyone to be able to do that in any sort of consistent and accurate way.
Well, I think, one of the things that from a lot of our listeners, they'll know that I often will say I come in as a tourist to some of these things. You can't possibly be on top of everything, certainly with the speed of change that's going on. It's kind of rhetorical, but it is true. Where I'm headed, I guess, is that when you think of the whole issue of security, you think in terms of, from my standpoint, data and data management and the whole evolution that we've gone through as it relates to the capture of I guess, profiling and actions and efforts that are taking. Artificial intelligence certainly is playing a role in terms of the whole evolution of automation. In that environment, is it possible that we can get a hold of it simply because we do really have the technical capability and that it isn't necessarily a problem that can't be solved? It's really a problem that's looking for a solution.
Yeah, absolutely. Data, like you said, we're in the data age now, obviously, and the amount of data that we're producing, not just consumable data that we all read and love on the internet, but log files that are being generated, security logs that are being generated are increasing exponentially, which it makes it more difficult for humans to deal with. But at the same time, we also are starting to develop some really good tools and really mature tools on how we can handle all this data and how we can analyze all this data. And that's really the next evolution of cybersecurity, is being able to handle these, literally hundreds of terabytes of data, which represent billions and sometimes trillions of log files or records, and being able to go through and really understand what's happening and finding the nuances and finding the, that proverbial needle in the haystack.
I would think that, again, the whole concept of Internet of Things, I mean, it only compounds, I mean, literally exponentially compounds the whole problem or the whole opportunity with all the different connections and the insecurity of a lot of those things. You guys are a young company, but one thing for sure, you're getting a lot of press, a lot of things that are the buzz, machine learning, big data, artificial intelligence. What are you guys doing that's different?
Well, I appreciate that. Yeah, it's exciting. We are getting a lot. We just got selected as one of the top 10 most innovative companies in Georgia, which is really exciting for us.
I'll bet.
And we'll be presenting at the Georgia Technology Summit here in a couple weeks. But as far as our innovations, I guess there's really three core components to our innovation. One is around what you were mentioning around data, right? And so, of course, everything circulates around data, but it's around, we've got an advanced analytics engine that is specifically built for cybersecurity, and it's built on the concept of unsupervised learning. And so, in the machine learning world, there's different approaches to machine learning. One is supervised learning, and I'm sure my data scientists would cringe at the way that I'm going to explain this, but imagine supervised learning as you've got a basket of fruit and you train the machine on what's an apple and what's a banana, what's an apple and what's a banana. Eventually, it's able to learn and make some decisions on its own. So when you pour out the basket of fruit, it can separate into two different piles. This is what looks like a banana. This is what looks like an apple. Unsupervised learning, you don't train anything up front. You pour out the basket of fruit and you say, okay, I want you to separate and segment everything by size or by shape or by color or by density or by taste or however you want the machine to classify it. And so it will classify things without being trained ahead of time. And what you're able to do there is you're able to find those nuances. You're able to find things that were previously unknown, that a human has not necessarily seen and educated the machine on, which gets to the first problem that I mentioned before around unknown threats, right? So all the tools out there today, they're based off of rules and signatures or this concept of supervised learning. So something has to train the machine on what to look for. Our analytics engine is based on this unsupervised learning, which means that we don't have to know about what the threat looks like. If there's a new type of behavior, if there's a new approach that an adversary takes, we're able to identify that because it's completely different than anything else that's being exhibited, right? And then the second innovation is around the
I would think that's inherent. I don't mean to step on the second there, but we'll get back to it. But I would think that that's almost inherent in machine learning. I mean, I don't know enough about it because it's only been a buzz to me over the last several months. But isn't it a case where in the conversation, quote unquote, learning from each other, they're going to pick up what would amount to habits or conditioned responses? Isn't that really kind of what you're talking about? If you see something that is 1, 2, 3, 7, 8, 12, something is wrong, right? I mean, I'm being primitive about it, but isn't that kind of what you're saying?
Yeah, essentially. And again, because there's the two different types of machine learning, right? There's the kind where you're basically training the machine on how to make a decision on its own.
Right.
And then there's the other kind of machine learning, unsupervised, which is the machine is going to look through all your data, and it's going to make its own decisions on what it finds is anomalous or what it determines is...
Took the word out of my mouth. I was going to say an anomaly. It looks okay.
Yeah, okay. So it's an anomaly. And again, we're talking about billions and trillions of records. So it's not looking at each individual record to find if that record itself is anomalous, but it's trying to understand how does this record play against all of the other records. And so it's comparing everything against each other. And so it's very computationally intensive to do that kind of machine learning.
Self-activating, notification, combination of both? I mean, what is the actual deliverable from the system as it relates to once it's implemented and identifying? How does the company get information and findings out of it?
Well, so what happens is it produces a list of outliers or a list of anomalies. And just because something is an anomaly does not mean that it's necessarily a threat, doesn't mean it's malicious. And so that's where our second innovation comes in, is the artificial intelligence. So the artificial intelligence is able to take those anomalies and basically act like a machine security analyst, whereas a machine security analyst can handle maybe 10 or 15 alerts, it takes 10 or 15 minutes to handle each alert. The artificial intelligence can process billions of alerts a day. And so it's able to go through and it's able to make decisions and apply context and apply I guess you'd say, sort of the wisdom of humans, right, to understand whether something is in fact malicious or not. And so what it's able to do is able to drop down what we call the false positive rate. So typical systems will have a false positive rate of close to, as high as 95%. With ours, we're able to drop that false positive rate down to less than 5%, which means that everything that is identified after it goes through the artificial intelligence and it's promoted to the customer, nearly everything there is something very important and prioritized that they should be looking at.
Okay, so once the system based on the introduction and the kind of feedback that you're getting, any definitives? I mean, what kind of things are you finding?
Yeah, so we've got several really good case studies. One of our early customers was in the healthcare space, and we found advanced threats that are on medical devices, for example. So there's essentially a foreign adversary that had installed software and was sitting on an imaging device. Now, we don't know, why they were there. We don't know what their intent was. We were able to identify it, and the customer was able to remediate the situation before anything happened. But that's scary when you think about it. The hospital networks rely on medical devices, obviously, to provide care and to help people,
Sure.
recover and become better. And when we've got adversaries that are able to make their way into an actual medical device, whether they're using that as transitionary so that they can get to, the private information that they want to exfiltrate, or whether they want to do something malicious with the actual device, that's a pretty scary scenario. We found insider threats, right? We've got a customer who's a very large technology organization, has a very mature security practice, and we were able to identify a user on their network who was very clever in the way that they were exfiltrating data from the customer to an off-site location. In fact, that the customer themselves, they thought it was just a piece of malware, just because of the nature of the behavior. But our analytics were able to identify that, that's not consistent, not entirely consistent with the way that malware operates. And so they were able to track down and deal with the insider who was essentially stealing data from the company.
Amazing. I mean, the balance of innovation against the challenges that seem to come up, both positive and negative. But you'd like to be able to explore all the potentials and all of the positive out of a technology. And the sad part about it is again, it's a question of good and evil, and the kind of things that you have to counter or be prepared to counter in terms of the marketplace. It's not enough anymore to have an economy that's radically disruptive and changing. Now you've got to concern yourself about the actual security of your operations of one kind and next every minute of every day. It's crazy. But yet the other side of it is that it's also exciting. I guess when you talk, Rob, it sounds so logical. Again, we joke about it, but a safety pin was, somebody had to invent a simple idea. I'm not saying that the idea was simple, but the concept that you're saying and the way you're approaching it it's brilliant. I mean, it would seem so obvious, but I don't know anybody else that's leveraging artificial intelligence for cybersecurity. Is there anybody doing it?
There's a few who are starting to dabble in that space in different ways. There's some who are starting to dabble in that space from a preventative point of view, right? So trying to prevent things from getting into the network, which, I mean, it's good. They're good technologies, and we need to have those technologies in place. But at the end of the day, adversaries are always going to be able to find a way into the network. Like you said, with the growing Internet of Things and all these different attack vectors and attack surfaces, at some point they'll be able to get in. And with insider threats as well, right? They're already inside your network by default. And so with what we're doing, no one else, to our knowledge anyways, has a advanced security analytics and artificial intelligence platform that they deliver as a service. And I guess the question around why isn't anyone else doing this? Why aren't organizations doing it themselves, or why hasn't someone else built it? It's very, very time-consuming. It's very research-intensive, and honestly, it's costly. So if you were to look at just the infrastructure alone that would be required for someone to deploy the big data analytics and the artificial intelligence, you're looking at millions, tens of millions of dollars a year to be able to implement and support this. And so that's where, I guess, our third innovation is that we do deliver this completely as a service. And so we're able to bring, technologies and capabilities that were previously only available to the very largest organizations in the world. And we're now able to deliver these to, I don't want to say enterprises of all size, but to virtually every organization that has a security practice.
Well, it's dynamic, it's complex, it's ever-changing, it's transforming and morphing almost within the conversation that we're having even today. And yet, thank goodness, from an entrepreneurial standpoint, knowing that there's some capabilities and technologies out there that are never resting, but constantly looking for new ideas and new concepts and new ways to overcome the problem. It sounds to me, obviously, that you guys have got a winner. TAGS recognized it with their recognition of the 10 most innovative. But also, again, as I mentioned earlier, a lot of buzz, a lot of conversation about what you guys are doing over there. Rob, great stuff. I think it's just a matter of time before we'll be hearing about how big you've gotten and how much you've grown, and hopefully a lot of our listeners will take advantage of getting involved in some of these things earlier than later, simply because I always talk about invest in the inevitable. And I think artificial intelligence and the way you guys are bundling it on this platform is just flat out inevitable. Well, thanks a lot for taking time out of what I got to believe is a really chaotic schedule with all of the things you got going, but to join us for a few minutes today on Tech Talk.
No, I really appreciate it, Frank. Thank you for the time. And if anyone wants some more information, of course, you can head over to our website, Cybraics, cybraics.com, or shoot me a direct email, just rkent@cybraics.com.